Welcome back, Leominsterites, to our November episode of Representing Leominster. I'm your State Representative, Natalie Higgins, and happy holiday season. And I'm so thrilled to be kicking off the official fall with Sheriff Lou Evangelidis, who came over to Leominster so we could chat a little bit about some new stuff that's going on. But for those of you who aren't familiar with Sheriff Lou, I wanted to make sure that you got to know him a little bit better and kind of how he got into his role and what the Sheriff's Office does. So. Sheriff Lou, thanks for coming.
Natalie, great to be on the show with you.
And I know that this is going to be a fast-moving 30-minute segment because we love to chat.
I know you can, so we'll cover a lot.
So if you could just, we ask everyone who's an elected official who comes on the show kind of like, what made you want to run, and how did you get involved with that? And then one of the other questions is kind of like, how can folks be a better advocate for issues that they care about? Because we get to hear folks a lot.
Well, I haven't really had that question in a while, so I'll think back. I'll say this about my political career is I never ran for office until I was 40. Believe it or not, I'm 40. But it was a long time ago, so well beyond 40. But I'd never run until I was 40. I'd moved back I grew up in a three-decker in Worcester, then moved to Holden, and then went off for many years, lived in 5 different states, traveled around the country, doing everything. Went to law school in, UMass Amherst Law School. Moved to California.
We're both UMass Amherst alum.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Loved UMass, and then I moved to California for a while and was a construction worker. And then I moved to New York City, worked down on Wall Street on the commodities exchange, and just then went to law school in Philadelphia. And ended up becoming an assistant state prosecutor, they call them assistant state attorney in Dade County, Florida, and Miami.
Okay.
And then I decided it was probably the right thing to move home. So I wasn't quite ready to come back to Central Mass, so I moved to Boston, became an assistant district attorney in Boston. And then just life took its way, and I ended up, having a family and children, and it came the opportunity to move back to my hometown of Holden, bought my grandparents' house. My grandfather had died, my grandmom couldn't keep the house.
My great-grandparents' house.
Oh, you understand this, yeah. So, I found myself at about 38, 39, buying my grandparents' house. Funny, Natalie, I'll tell you one quick story on that. My grandfather says to me, I'm graduating from high school, standing in the yard, about 5 acres of land in Holden, and he says, Lou, you're my oldest grandson. I want to have you keep this open land here so you can have your family move back to Holden. I said, Grandpa, I will never move back to Holden. I was going to travel the world. Thank you very much. 20 years almost to the day I bought his house. And,
I love that.
Yeah, and it's actually beautiful because my parents, God willing, God bless, are still alive and doing well, living right next door where I grew up. So, because we built a house right on my grandparents' land. That's why I grew up there. So there's a little trail between our houses, and I used to go up the trail to visit my grandparents, and then my kids went down that same trail.
I can't believe we haven't talked about this. So I own my great-grandparents' house. My brother owns my grandparents' house where I grew up, and my parents live next door.
Right.
So we have recreated my childhood scenario where we were able to run down the driveway to my grandparents. Yeah.
It's a beautiful. I'll joke because everybody you must have heard this before. Oh, you have the Kennedy compound, right? Yeah. We got a little Kennedy compound in Newell Road in Holden. But my kids were the 5th generation to grow up in the same street, and I felt like I gave them the gift of roots in a community. It's very special. So anyway, I was living there, and I'd been an attorney, practicing attorney for about, I was graduate from law school in 87, so probably 12, 13 years at that time. And I just thought it was maybe time to look at some other things I'd like to do. And I've always loved politics. So there was they redistricted in our area. As you know, they do every 10 years. And the district I had moved to had changed substantially. And we had a representative who I felt, I heard a lot about, really nice guy, David Bunker. But I heard he wasn't really involved in the community as much. Like he was spending a lot of time in Boston and did things different. And I just thought, I always want to get involved in politics. Maybe I'll run for it. So I threw my hat in the ring. I was kind of an unknown guy. I just moved back to Holden. I've been gone for 20 years. And I worked real hard, as you know it takes.
Yeah.
I worked real hard.
Yeah.
I was blessed to have won that race. I was blessed to serve 4 terms in the State House. Like you're approaching which term for you now?
No, I'm only in my second. I'm still new.
But you're looking good.
Yeah.
But you're going forward. But I did 4 terms.
Yeah.
So that probably will get to the point where maybe there'll be a point in your future where you might think, I've served my time, not literally like the sheriff, time in the legislature. But I felt 8 years it was time to think of maybe something different. I've always worked in about 10-year cycles in my life. So as in politics, as you know, opportunity is really everything when it meets timing. And the Sheriff Glotis was leaving the office, and I had a prosecutorial background, as I mentioned, law school and state attorney, DA, and I love and I'm sure you were involved in a lot of those issues too. I really liked the criminal justice issues at the State House. I was on the Judiciary Committee, and I just thought it might be a good fit for me. So I took a good look at what the sheriffs did, and frankly, I didn't love the Worcester County reputation and perception it had by the people of being a place of a lot of patronage in politics. But I looked at other sheriff's departments around the state and the country, and they were observed quite differently. They were perceived to be very professional, very much about public safety. And I thought, I'd like to be that kind of sheriff. So I kind of made the decision to run. I was very blessed to have run a hard but good campaign. I was elected, and here we are 9 years later. I'm still there, and I love the job more than I ever dreamed I would. And every day I wake up, I think how lucky I am to work in such a wonderful environment.
No, thanks for sharing all of that. And I know you were in Leominster last night with the Markoff Foundation, so I would love for you to tell a little bit about how you've been working with them. And for folks who remember Vanessa Marcotte, that tragedy, the family has really rallied to try to bring resources together to protect community members and help give them tools so that no scenario like Vanessa experienced ever happens again.
Right. Well, thank you for mentioning that. And I will mention we had it in Leominster last night. And Leominster, in a way, when I ran for sheriff, I kind of adopted it as my hometown. I really did, because I looked at the county and I looked at the towns that would really make a difference. And Leominster, as you know, is a town of politics that comes in. They'll vote for good candidates of either party, and they're very independent-minded. And I knew a lot of people up here, and I thought, you know what, I'm really going to focus a lot of my energy. And I really loved this community, and I got to know it really, really well. It's a wonderful
really
town.
Special,
It really is. Leominster's a really special place. So with that in mind, I've always had an affinity for Leominster, and when we had the Markoff Foundation, and just to back up what you opened this conversation with, which I appreciate, was Vanessa Marcotte was part of my legislative district, Princeton. When I was a legislator, I had 7 towns. You were blessed to have one self-contained community.
Very spoiled here in Leominster.
And I envy you, because I had 7, which was nice, but it spreads you thin.
It's hard to balance.
But as you know the story of Vanessa Marcotte, in case anyone doesn't, she was a young woman in her mid-20s, came home for the weekend, visiting her mom in Princeton, went out for a run in an area which I'm very familiar with, and never came home. And just fast forward that, unfortunately, it was discovered, her body, and she was brutally murdered. And we have arrested the suspect in the case, who's in our jail. And anyway, the family was devastated, as you can imagine, and for all of us in our community were devastated. Whenever there's a murder or a brutal crime like that, it hits home. For me particularly, it hit even harder just because of the fact it was a community which I'd really been known well. She was very similar in age to my daughters. A lot of us go out on runs and things, and family, and wives and sisters and people, and it just thought, like, wow, so unfair. Like, women are subjected to this kind of possibility every day of their lives. So the Marcotte Foundation decided they wanted to help women defend themselves, so they would be at least better prepared in a situation like that. And I can't tell you how much it meant to me that they came to the Sheriff's Department and kind of started a dialogue with us about, could you partner with us? And we were, overwhelmed at the possibility of doing something so meaningful for women in this community. And I can't tell you how proud I am of this program we developed, which is women. It's essentially this, and we did it last night at the Fidelity building in Leominster. We've done 4 or 5 of them now in our partnership. We do them every couple months, but it's essentially the women correctional staff stepped up when our training department said, we want to take this on, and we had about a dozen women in our department said, we want to take the lead. We want to teach women in this community how to defend themselves. And I thought, who better than women correctional staff at the Worcester County Sheriff's Department, who are outstanding young ladies, and to have them take the lead. So what they do is we have a limited number of seats, because we want to make sure it's hand-to-hand, one-on-one training. So you don't go to a room and there's like one instructor and 100 people. We keep it to between 30 and 35 people, and we have between 8 and 10 instructors. So it's amazing. So there's a very brief presentation from myself, just introducing our office, and the Marcotte Foundation, and introducing their story and what they want to accomplish. and then we get into what we want to do. And really what it comes down to, Natalie, is self-awareness, especially for women. I said, 85 to 90% of women are the victims of these violent offenses, and it's just an unfair world we live in. But we want to teach women self-awareness is the first thing we talk about, and always be aware of what's going on around you, because if you're aware of what's around you, you're more likely to be able to stop it before it gets to a bad place. And we teach a lot of things in handouts about things like, if you go for a run, notify people where you're going, change your routes around, don't wear 2 earbuds if you're running because you can't hear what's going around you. And then, to fast forward, and then we get to we lay out the mats and we break into small groups, and they teach women these 5 or 6 moves of self-defense, depending on 90% again of attacks occur with certain situations, a choke, a grab behind you. We teach you how to get. And the bottom line is, Natalie, we can't teach you from the time you get there and leave in 2 hours complete self-defense techniques. But we can teach you how to survive. And that's what we do. We teach you how to be aware of everything to prevent it, do preventive measures, be aware of your surroundings, and in the worst case scenario that something happens, we want you to be able to get out of that situation, get back to your loved ones, and call the local authorities and see if we can, we can catch this person. But it's really a moving thing to be part of. I get really choked up even thinking about what happened to Vanessa, her family, her mom, her dad, her grandparents come every time. It's very moving, and we had it last night in Leominster, and the people there were just very appreciative. The women that were there just very thankful of having this opportunity, and I can't even tell you how blessed I am to be part of something like that.
No, thank you for bringing that to Leominster. And sexual violence prevention is near and dear to my heart. I spent over a decade as a rape crisis counselor and continue to. The vast majority of my legislation is between that and higher education access, like the 2 areas that I've worked in. So the more that we can do, and I did a lot of that with teens, of just letting them start to think about what are those gender norms and how do we get to a place where 90% of the victims are women, and talking about the expectations that it's a hard conversation to have even with high school students of like, boys, what do you do on a daily basis to prevent yourself from getting sexually assaulted? And they look at you like you have 3 heads. Like, what are you talking about? I say, girls, what do you do? And they go, we carry our keys. We tell people where we are. We talk on our phone. We don't talk on our phone. We park under a light. We don't go out by ourselves. They fill the whiteboard. And for the boys in the classroom, they're like, you think about that? And they were like, not all the time, but if something were to happen to us, for sure we're thinking about what did we not do that's on that board. And that's a hard thing to sit with, but the more that we can have that prevention conversation and start thinking, especially as kids, how do we have healthy relationships with each other? How do we interact with each other in a healthy way? I think that's all of those pieces are really important to talk about. So thank you for that.
No, I think what you just said is it's the reality of the world we live in. We wish it wasn't like that. I mean, I have daughters. I don't have sons. I have daughters, and they shouldn't have to live in a world where they have to go through that checklist, that they have to be worried about that, but they do. And so let's talk about it and let's raise the awareness level and let's help them protect themselves.
And I love doing that twofold, doing the prevention work, but actually giving the tools for like kind of what's happening right now. And another program that I am a huge fan of, and I've gotten to come to some of your graduations, is the Community Corrections Program. And I'm on the Mental Health, Substance Use, and Recovery Committee for the second time. And I think given what is happening with the opioid crisis and how many families are being impacted and really devastated by this, I'm such a fan of what the Community Corrections Program is doing for giving these folks a second chance and really understanding and giving them the tools to deal with their trauma and their addiction and rebuild their lives. So could you explain a little bit more about how that came about and how it's going?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for coming, Natalie, because it's very inspirational for the people who graduate from these programs to see someone like yourself, who's an elected official, who's respected in your community, come out there and as you have eloquently told them that you're proud of them, that you're supporting them, that we're here for them. It means a lot. So I know yourself, Senator Tran has come out, Representative Hay,
and the
mayor, the mayors, the police chiefs, I mean the community. But what it is, because people may not be familiar with them, but the sheriff, myself anyway, not every county has them, we're again a blessing, and I mean it. I use that word a lot, but this job is a really remarkable job, and the resources we have in the sense of people is incredible. And I'm a big proponent of community centers as opposed to incarceration, if at all possible. And what these community centers do is we divert people. So if you go before the judge, you're in the criminal justice system, you've gone before a judge, there's an option of sentencing you or incarcerating you, but you are a predominantly drug offender. You've got a substance abuse problem. There's diversionary programs we can do perhaps that are better serve you. Besides sending you to prison, number one, which is an unhealthy environment for many people. Number two, it is expensive, $50,000 a year. And number three, you can learn a lot of bad habits. Why not keep you in your home? For about $4,000 a year, we can divert you to a community center, which we have, which has people that will help you with your substance abuse problems, help you with resume writing, help you get a GED or a high set, a supportive environment of people. And one thing I love to hear, when someone goes before the judge and they say, we're going to refer you through probation to the sheriff's program, and it's in Fitchburg here, we have one in Worcester and one in Webster, the people always tell me that go to these programs, nobody judges me when we walk in the door. We want to, and I tell them, we don't have robes. I've never seen a person in the sheriff's department with a robe on. We don't judge. But, look, we have a serious job, and sometimes people need to be taken off the streets. They need to be incarcerated.
For sure.
They are dangerous to the community. And I will be the first one to take those people and keep them. But there's a lot of people also that are on the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
They really have substance abuse problems. We need to get those under control. We believe these centers and what we celebrated, which you've come to, are the graduations of these intensive programs where people have committed. You don't get a chance to celebrate with us and graduate with us unless you've committed to the program. And if you don't, we drug test you too regularly. Kind of there's a color code every day, and if your color comes up, you better come in. And if you fail that drug test, you'll be sent back to the judge. So there's accountability in this. It's not babysitting, but it's real opportunities to turn your life around, avail yourselves to the resources we have. And the people that work there are amazing, and they really want to help these people, and you can feel it. And I know you've been, so you've experienced it too, but that's what we do in the center, and we get references from the Fitchburg court, the Leominster court, the Gardner court, and we serve the North County. And I know that center is making our community a better, safer place because people have a place to go every day.
Absolutely.
And they get skills, so when they're done with that program, they're less likely to repeat offend. At the end of the day, everything we do in the Sheriff's Department in some way feeds into making our community safer by reducing recidivism and giving people a better way of life than going back to their old ways of crime in the streets. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and that has been a big conversation in the criminal justice reform that happened last session, in my first session, of just how do we reduce recidivism and understanding that because of the opioid crisis, there are a lot of first-time offenders who maybe aren't young adults. Like, a lot of our diversion programs across the state have been aimed at someone under the age of 25.
Right.
Well, what happens if the first time you're offending is when you're 40 or 45? You should still have that second chance to get the skills to be able to show that you have the ability to kind of change your behavior and go forward, and also address. We talk about it on the student level, and a lot of the legislation I file around mental health mental health care access. Our kids are showing up with a whole lot of trauma, and we finally understand kind of ACEs and adverse childhood experiences and how that might impact your development and kind of the path you choose forward, that we've got to catch that early. So as we're doing that kind of upstream, it's really important that we're doing these programs that have the data to back up that they're working and that they're moving our communities forward.
Well, I'll mention one thing to you, just because, and it's sort of what I observe very closely, and everything you said is very accurate about how people come into this system. But the one thing I've learned in working with the people in substance abuse world is that there are a lot of excuses how you end up in that world. And most of them, if not all of them, are legitimate. It can be from a very dysfunctional upbringing. It can be from trauma. It can be from a number of things. But what I found, though, is the people who recover, the people who get better, they have to accept their responsibility in it. And that's what I noticed, especially in the programs we have at the jail, which we have tremendous programs. I sit with these inmates all the time, and we talk. And the ones who get better, the ones who recover, always say, Sheriff, I had a million excuses, and it was always, and I'm just off the top of my head, my dad left the family, I got fired from my job, I had a bad childhood, all that's true. But the people say, but you know what, at the end of the day, Sheriff, I make the decision to do it, and I have to take responsibility. And when they get to that point, it's not easy, but when they get to that point, you can see the recovery. And that's where we have to focus on people, is understand how they got what they did, but then get them to try to accept their role in their problem. Because in the end of the day, I mean, people want they're not proud of themselves. I'll tell you one little story, but when I first became sheriff, I met with the other sheriffs before I was even sworn in, and I asked them at one point, I'm 6'7", I'm not too fearful of my physical being, but I said, do you ever feel any fear in the streets or people that have been incarcerated? And they said, one sheriff said to me something so true. He said, Sheriff, anybody who's failing outside, back on drugs, committing crimes, they don't want to get in your way. They don't want to bother you. They're not proud of themselves. They're going to walk away from you. The people who are going to come up to you are the ones who are proud of themselves, who are going to tell you their success stories. And I will tell you, Natalie, it seems like if not every day, every week, I walk around this community and I see people and they come right up to me and they're like, Sheriff, do you remember me? I was in the stop program. Do you remember me? I graduated from the program in Fitchburg. And you know what? Sometimes I remember them, sometimes I don't. But they're proud to tell me their success stories. And I used to say at the end of every ceremony inside the jail, I'd say to the inmates, I'd say, let me leave you this. I never want to see you again. And everybody would laugh because they got what I was saying. But I tell them that's not what I mean. And I tell them that story now. I said, what I do is I do want to see you outside, but I want to see you outside when you're telling me how successful you are and how well you're doing. That's why we do the work we do. We try to make what we do in West Boylston, which is where the jail is, a true house of correction. So, look, there are plenty of people who go to state prison. That's where they belong. But I got a lot of people that are going to be getting out, and they're coming back to, your town, my town, everywhere in Worcester County, and we have a job to do, and it's important, and it's to make sure those people who get out are less likely to repeat offend and, able to make their families and their community proud of them and become productive, citizens. So it's a hard job, but I can't tell you, Natalie, how many great people we have at the jail, either when I got there or we've brought on board since. So it's extraordinary. But again, I want to thank you for always being at those ceremonies when you're available and your kind words. And I'm sure you've seen the people's reactions. It's real. You can't fake that stuff.
Well, similar to your story, one of the reasons I really wanted to run is because in my community in Leominster, I think there was a lot of distrust of people who would choose to run for office and be a politician.
Oh, yeah.
And why would you want to do that? And we can't trust you. And so much of it is, right? Folks don't call my office when they're having a good day. They're calling my office when they're in crisis, probably when they've waited so long. The story that is forever that I'm like, please call me early, when they're like, it's been 8 weeks, I haven't got my unemployment check, and now I'm really behind on my mortgage or my rent or my car payment. I was like, when you are stuck on hold or you're getting frustrated with the state system, call me. That is my job. When you're stuck on hold, your time is precious. We're a gateway city. We have a lot of working families, seniors, young adults who have a lot on their plates. And so the more that we can make the systems work for them, I'm so thankful to get to be a state rep because, we have the privilege of representing about 42,000 people. I get to represent my city, my home city, and they get to know me. And I'm just the neighbor that was crazy enough to run for office, and put myself out there every 2 years. But at the same time, it's because I believe I saw the gaps in the system when my parents were struggling and my family was struggling, and a lot of it had to do with just not understanding how to access the programs that were there. So the more that we can help with that, and I just think it's really awesome to get to talk to the different levels of government, especially the county government, because I don't think folks are as familiar with how the county systems work because they're a little older and you don't get as much face time with them. So it's really awesome. And I know when we were headed in to the studio, we were talking about some of the other programs that I was just checking out your website when I was getting ready for you to come in. And I love animals. I also love gardening. So I know that you have some programs at the jail that are related to this.
Well, no, I know we could go on forever, and I'm probably getting close to time, but I just want to talk a couple of things. First, I want to mention we have the coat drive going on now, and we have it's the Sheriff's Department and our charitable organization, the Reserve Deputies, in the middle of a huge coat drive. This community has been very good to provide coats to us. We collect them, newer or lightly used, and we distribute them. And we go all over the county. We distribute about 3,000 to 4,000 coats every year. We've always done the Spanish American Center here in Leominster.
And you're adding the new Women's Recovery
We're adding
program.
the new Women's Recovery Center right here, which is, extraordinary facility for women. And we've already added them to it, so we're in the midst of that. We do a lot of inmate work crews here. As people see us, we work, the mayor will call us all the time, and we'll bring those crews out for any nonprofit. But inside the jail, with a minute or two we have left, I'll just mention I'm very proud of. I like to find programs, and I won't get into our budget thing with you. That's your prerogative. But, we are one of the lower funded sheriff's departments, and we have to be more creative than others. And that's just the way, Middlesex has 20 more million than we do, and we have more inmates than they do. It's hard to do the work with 6 teachers versus 20, but we do because we have great people. But we had to find innovative programs. And for example, we have an agriculture program right now that's an organic farm that we grow between 30 and 40,000 pounds of food. We do it with inmate labor, and they love this program, by the way. They're grateful to get out, do this work. The inmates appreciate, they get the fact that they grow these organic vegetables, essentially, zucchini, squash, tomatoes, green beans. We add stuff every year. We distribute those foods not only to the inmate population and saving us $20,000, but we distribute about 500 to 600 pounds of food every day to food pantries all over this community. And believe it or not, Natalie, this is the punchline. The whole program costs us $396.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a great little program, and we have 2 dog programs. I know we're all animal lovers. We have 2 really wonderful dog programs where we partner with a shelter, and they bring dogs to our facility with our lowest security inmates. These are our best inmates. They've earned the right to be in this work release building, and we have 4 dogs at a time. They get brought in. They're trained by the shelter. They're fed by the shelter. We have services offered by the local veterinarians for free. So the program costs us nothing. The inmates get to rehabilitate these dogs. We are 72 for 72 dog adoptions. First dozen were adopted by our own employees. And the inmates changes people bonding with these dogs. And it's a really special program. And again, that doesn't cost us 1 penny. And it's a very therapeutic program for the inmate, and it makes our place a safer place because the officers say, Sheriff, that building has never been safer until we brought the dogs in. So a lot of good stuff going on. I really appreciate you giving me an
30
opportunity.
minutes blew by, Sheriff. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. We're going to have you back so we can talk about what we missed. And I just want to thank you all for tuning in, and a plug because we're heading into the holiday season, and before I film my next episode with the DA, we're going to have our 3rd annual Cookies and Cocoa with Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus. So for those of you who have gotten to come, it's down at the Veterans Center Sunday after Thanksgiving, Sunday, December 2nd. And please come join us for Cookies and Cocoa. We're doing a book drive this year instead of a toy drive because there was a real need to make sure that all of our students in the area have access to books at home. So please bring a new or a gently used book, join us, have some cookies, have some cocoa, and hang out with Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus. And for every family that comes, they're going to get a printed photo. So it's an early way for you to get your holiday photos done. So would love to see you, and thanks for tuning in. See you next month.